So we do want to talk about these protests that are now spreading around the country, obviously organized, these Jew-hating organizations supporting Hamas and the murders that were committed in Israel and not wanting Israel to continue to prosecute the war against the people trying to wipe them off the face of the earth. There was an article in the now crappy news section of Emma Tucker's Wall Street Journal saying that these Jew-hating students are staging their Jew-hating protests at Jew-hating universities. I'm adding a little bit of this, but they're saying because they're so traumatized by the pandemic, right? They're so traumatized by the pandemic. Well, first of all, they're not traumatized by the pandemic. They're traumatized by the government reaction to the pandemic, the worst failure of leadership in the West since World War I. Nothing about the pandemic would have traumatized them if they had caught the flu and had the snuffles for a couple of days and then gone back to class. But they have been they're already suffering this isolation from from the media, from the cell phones and the internet is already isolating them from one another. But now they're actually afraid to go out. So that's not the other thing. But the other thing is, no, this is something, what's happening right now is, first of all, it's a result of being what's taught in school. And I'll talk about that in a moment. But it's also the fact that we are in a period of decadence. Let's not call it decline because we don't know where it's going. But right now, our institutions are collapsing. They are falling apart because of leftism, right? And when leftism destroys things, and leftism is almost like a form of aging, it's almost something, it's the way things decline, because as we get successful, we start to think like that it was all easy, things are peaceful, they don't have anything to do with the military, and people got rich and they don't deserve their wealth, and so we should just take their wealth and spread it around and then everything will be fair. It's kind of almost just like aging. But then what happens, of course, is the right, which is a reactionary movement, the far right is a reactionary movement, they react to it, and so they become the same thing. And so they get to be anti-Semitic too, and the left is anti-Semitic. It's like the cockroaches running out of a collapsing building. That's what you're seeing. You're seeing cockroaches running out of a collapsing building. It's happening on the right with their Jew hatred, but this is much more powerful because the left owns the culture. So that's what we're seeing, and that's why they're out there calling for Jews to surrender and die, which is what it means to surrender to thugs and villains and killers like Hamas. This is, again, and this is nothing to do with Israeli politics. Half the people, here's a protester, one of the protesters. Let's ask her what she's protesting about. This is cut 9.
What would you say is the main goal with tonight's protest?
I think the goal is just showing our support for Palestine and demanding that NYU stops. I honestly don't know all of what NYU's doing.
Is there something that NYU's doing?
I really don't know. I'm pretty sure do you know what NYU's doing?
About what?
About Israel. Why are we protesting here?
Palestine will be free!
I wish I was more educated.
I wish I was more educated. You might be more educated if you were in class and if the people who were teaching your classes weren't a bunch of leftist dopes, I love that. I don't know why I'm here outside, protesting outside Columbia. I wish I were more educated, as if I had gone to Columbia. It's absolutely terrific. So half of these people don't know what they're doing, but the organizers know, and the organizers are Jew-hating, Israel-hating SOBs. And of course, believe me, the right supports them. The far right, this Groyper right, supports them just as much as the far left, because they are the cockroaches running out of a building. Look, I can sit down with anybody in the middle and have a conversation about what's going on and why I see things differently than them. I always try to avoid getting into personalities, because they might like Hillary and I might be fonder of Trump and all that, and you can't settle that stuff. But I can talk about principles with anybody. I can find compromises and ways forward with anybody who is in the middle and believes. But where the middle is for me is freedom. If we both believe in liberty, if we both believe in individual liberty, we can talk, right? But once things become the far right versus the far left, it's going to be Nazis versus communists. They both stink. And the way you can tell they stink is they all hate Jews, because people who hate Jews hate God. That's the devil's flagpole. That's how you know. So Republicans, it's a good look for Republicans to show up at these protests, even if they get shouted down. So Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, who I have other things to say about, but I won't say him today. But, he goes to one of these protests at Columbia and they shout him down. And then he gets interviewed by CNN's Erin Burnett, who is a reporter who really is the perfect combination of dishonesty and stupidity. I mean, she is really, really the perfect CNN reporter. So here is the interview between Johnson and Erin Burnett of CNN, cut 10.
We have these similar types of activities and what are becoming violent protests on campuses around the country. And members of Congress, I believe, have an obligation, a responsibility to speak about this and to demand that it come to an end, because it's not good for us.
The main thing they were chanting was Free Palestine. How is that anti-Semitic?
Well, what's anti-Semitic is that Hamas endorsed this protest today.
What could be anti-Semitic? It's like, these guys are chanting from the river to the sea. You know, they don't know where those are, but the organizers know, and they know that means destroying Israel. Witnesses say demonstrators chanted support for terrorist organizations. They burned the American flag, waved Hezbollah's flag. It's unbelievable, these spoiled idiots, these fools, these useful idiots who are being used by, of course, Hezbollah and Hamas, Iran, essentially, a country that would happily blow us up. It only wants to get Israel out of the way before coming after us. They called for Hamas's Al-Qassam brigades to attack again. They taunted Jewish students. Never forget the 7th of October. That will happen 10,000 more times. These Jewish students don't feel safe. And you know, this is not, they don't feel safe because of microaggressions. They don't feel safe because people are threatening them, poking out their eyes and things like this. But luckily, your president is so tolerant. He says there are fine people on both sides. Cut 8.
Do you condemn the anti-Semitic protests on college campuses?
I condemn the anti-Semitic protests. That's why I've set up a program to deal with that. I also condemn those who don't understand what's going on with the Palestinians.
You know, this guy, remember, ran on the fact that Trump said there are fine people on both sides, which is a hoax, because he said 2 sentences later, I don't mean the Nazis, I don't mean the bad guys, I only mean the people who are arguing over statues. But Biden means it. He means Hamas. He means the people who raped people to death, set children on fire. Susan Sarandon, the actress, unbelievable, saying, "Oh, that's a hoax." You know, it's a myth. It's a myth that they did that. So where are those babies? You know, how come they're dead? I don't know. It's just a myth. So what's really happening here is these children who, you know, I talk to young people all the time. Some of them are wonderful. Some of them are quite smart. But you don't have time at that age to have really become a scholar yet, to really know what you're talking about. You're depending on scholars to teach you stuff, not to teach you what to think, but to teach you stuff so you can begin to know how to think, to teach you people who disagree, to teach you different points of view so that you can learn how to judge them. That's not what they're teaching. They are teaching an ideology. You know, Alexander Solzhenitsyn in the Gulag Archipelago, and if you haven't read at least the abridged version, the other one is very repetitive, the regular one is very repetitive, but Solzhenitsyn approved an abridged version, which is absolutely brilliant, about what it is like to be in the gulags and what it meant to be in the gulags in the Soviet Union. He has this passage where he says, to do evil, a human being, this is Solzhenitsyn, to do evil, a human being must first of all believe that what he's doing is good, or else that it's a well-considered act in conformity with natural law. Fortunately, it is in the nature of the human being to seek a justification for his actions. Ideology, that is what gives evildoing its long-sought justification and gives the evildoer the necessary steadfastness and determination. That is the social theory which helps to make his acts seem good instead of bad in his own and others' eyes, so that he won't hear reproaches and curses, but will receive praise and honors. Thanks to ideology, the 20th century was fated to experience evildoing on a scale calculated in the millions. Even the Nazis felt bad about slaughtering innocent people and had to be told, no, we are the good guys. We're the good guys. We are doing a noble thing. I know it's hard because your conscience is bothering you, but history will thank us. And it didn't work out that way. History didn't thank them, but they felt then, oh, okay, I get it. This is actually, this bad thing I'm doing is the right thing to do. So what is this ideology? It's this anti-colonization idea. Now, I want to read something from Simon Sebag Montefiore, who is on the left. He is a left-wing guy, but he is a very bright guy. And he writes, the decolonization narrative has dehumanized Israelis to the extent that otherwise rational people excuse, deny, or support barbarity. This is what a false ideology does. It holds that Israel is an imperialist, colonialist force, that Israelis are settler colonialists, and that Palestinians have a right to eliminate their oppressors. On October 7th, we all learned what that meant, right? To eliminate their oppressors. It cast Israelis as white, or white adjacent and Palestinians as people of color. That is how you rank. That's how you know the good guys from the bad guys. It's right on their face, right? It's just, I mean, it's the same thing as a Klansman saying that's how he knows the bad guys. He doesn't like the black guys. These guys don't like the white guys. And so the Israelis, who are, by the way, the Jews are indigenous to this area. This is where the Jews come from. They're indigenous to Israel, but they are white and white adjacent because they're Westerner. That's why. He goes on to say this ideology, powerful in the academy, but is long overdue for serious challenge. It's a toxic, historically nonsensical mix of Marxist theory, Soviet propaganda, and traditional anti-Semitism from the Middle Ages in the 19th century. But its current engine is the new identity analysis, which sees history through a concept of race that derives from the American experience. We have treated people in this country, in the beginning of this country, we treated black people in a way that was unforgivable. It was terrible. We have done a lot, I think, to change that. But it is a true thing, and that is where this theory is growing up from people who hate America and so never want the wounds to heal. They do not want the wounds to heal. They want to make sure that there's no grace, no forgiveness, no looking back at the past and saying, well, that was the past. We learned through the past. No, forget all that. And this is the color revolution brought to America through identity politics and through the people who are instigating these protests. And by the way, some of the funding for this, not all of it, but some of the funding for this is coming from George Soros. This is an article Ira Stoll wrote in the Wall Street Journal tracing the fact that some of these people had received grants of up to $3,000, more than $3,000, and stipends to teach them this ideology, and that some of the money for that came from the George and Alexander Soros' Open Society Foundation. And I love that because we were always being told it's anti-Semitic to attack George Soros, but he's the guy funding this. But I want to just say this, okay? You know, the ideology, it's always smart to stick to the ideology instead of identity. Because when you look at all this, it all comes down to one thing. The Muslim can't be named because he's brown, right? Wikipedia can't be fair and open because that helps the white man. The Jews can't survive because they're white adjacent. And I know it's bigotry against white people, but it's still all about race. If you want more great stuff, like and subscribe. And please subscribe to The Andrew Klavan Show for even more great stuff.